Oh, I think it actually did go live. Are we actually live on YouTube by the chance, anybody? I don't know. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to do that.
Yeah, StreamYard goes straight to live.
Okay, so I think we are live. Yeah, okay. Okay, welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you very much. It's not the Garnacho stand. We are live. Welcome to the United stand. Something a little bit different tonight. Welcome to the show, Terry.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. I've got Terry on the show tonight because he's got some interesting views about INEOS. I've got some interesting views about INEOS. You've got interesting views about INEOS. So we're going to get a little bit into INEOS actually, because there is some more out today that some people have found out that they might be losing their job at Dennis Law's wake, which I found absolutely appalling. There are more cuts apparently to come. We will talk about that. We will talk about a few other bits. Apparently, Man United are heading to Malaysia at the end of the season to earn £7 million. I know Newcastle did that last year. I think it's a silly idea, but I suppose it gets money in, but it's more charitable for players. We've also going to be talking about expectations for the summer. I want to ask Terry what he thinks about selling the likes of Garnacho, etc. How much we think it will be for Amorim to get back on track and how much we actually think he will get. I want to talk a bit about PSR because I saw a clip of Paul Scholes getting very confused about it earlier on. But I want to start off with striker madness, really. I saw this story today about Benny McCarthy saying that not INEOS, Eric Ten Hag wanted Harry Kane. And they wanted Harry Kane and they really wanted Harry Kane. But Man United decided not to get Harry Kane. And they liked Osman as well. But Man United decided not to get Harry Kane or Osman. And they decided to get Rasmus, although they wanted Kane and Rasmus. So anyway, they wanted Harry Kane and they were disappointed they didn't get Harry Kane. And I saw Beth's show this afternoon talking about Osman and Man United are scouting Osman. And I just think the first thing I would ask you, Terry, is do you think, because I think you know where I'm going to go with this, do you think the obsession about a striker for Manchester United solves Manchester United's problems?
Partially. In the short term, I think it does. I think we have a conversion rate this season from our attackers of about 8%. Only Southampton's is worse than that. So I think that if we had a striker or two attackers converting at 15%, 20%, 25%, we'd probably be 5, 6, 7 places higher in the league table. Amorim would have more wins. And I think the pressure would be less. So I think in the short term, it could definitely solve some issues. But we need so much more. When in the summer, even before we knew Amorim was coming, I felt 80 to 90% of this squad over the next 2 to 3 years, if we were genuinely going to go through a full-scale rebuild, would have to be moved on. And I stand by that, probably even more so now. So I don't think having a number 9 fixes Man United, but I certainly think it would have scored more goals, won more games, and that would have solved some of the pressure that we're currently seeing against Amorim.
Farousi says Goldbridge is absolutely fuming at that answer. Look, I must say that with regards to Terry, I should have introduced him properly. We've known each other for about a decade. We were sworn enemies about 10 years ago. And he runs the Football Terrace, which I'm sure some of you do watch. And if you don't, you should be watching it. So sorry, I didn't do the proper introduction there. With regards to being fuming about what Terry said, by all means, get your comments in. We'll read into some of those. I actually probably a week ago would have jumped down your throat there and said, what are you talking about? There's absolutely no service into the striker. I did a video a few weeks ago where actually for 7 years, whether it's Cavani, Rashford, Martial, Erasmus, Xerxes, we average factually less than 2 shots per game for our strikers. Yet Harry Kane at Spurs was getting nearly 4. Haaland, Watkins are all the same. What I would say, though, and it's a very, very recent change, is that if you had an Osman taking the chances Garnacho and Xerxes got at the weekend, we would have beat Spurs. So I do feel the need for a striker. I've always said we do need a need for an experienced striker. And I certainly think when you look at Rasmus's age and you think about Harry Kane and Osman, etc., you're not necessarily the complete striker at 21. So I think he always needed that. But we have to solve the service problem. And my big issue is that I do think there is an obsession. I agree with what you say, but I do think going back to not creating chances, we've been obsessed with the striker. Some of our fans are obsessed with the striker. And we had Cristiano Ronaldo, we had Cavani, and we still didn't really, we had a shit season. Ronaldo was here, didn't we? I can't remember where we finished with Ronaldo, although he did score a few goals. I think we need to build a team. And I would not want to be spending 60, 70, 80 million pounds on another striker if that's most of our budget.
Yeah, I understand that point of view. I mean, we've got one of the worst conversion rates this season of big chances that we've had created, but we are 11th in terms of big chances created in the Premier League. I think this is one of those conversations where it can't be polarized. We do need a prolific goal scorer, but we also need additional creation. For about 5 years, Bruno's been the only person that's really created with any real regularity. Even when you think back before Amorim and the use of the inside forwards, they all want to score. Garnacho wants to score. Rashford wanted to score. Greenwood, when he was here, wanted to score. Anthony, none of their first thought was, 100%. Can I get into a position for a pullback? I think their first thought was, I want to score. And the balance was always off. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we've had at the club for the best part of the last 12 years is a lack of balance. So I am in agreement with you. I don't think a number 9, a goal scorer, solves all of our problems, but it would be a great remedy to the headache right now, if that makes sense. So yeah, we need one, but we need a lot more. There's a lot of United fans online, I'm sure we'll get more into this, that they seem to think there's just quick fixes around the corner for a club that's been broken for 12 years, financially mismanaged for 20 years. And we have this Frankenstein squad that's still got connections as far back as LVG. The idea that anyone, whether it was Amorim or Conte came in, whether it was the Qataris who I wanted to own us or INEOS, the idea that it was going to be fixed like with 3 or 4 signings or a new manager, I think that's the element of conversation that really needs to be had in that United fan base, because I think we need some realistic conversations and some realism in terms of opinion on these things.
Darren Taylor says, he's been one of our members for 18 months. Glazers and Radcliffe out. I was always full sail. We need the debt cleared or we'll get worse before it gets better. We're certainly going to be talking about that because Terry's got some different ideas. Also got some different ideas around how you would get them out, which I've listened to some of your stuff in the past, which I think would be interesting to bring in. I think just to close the striker thing off, because people would be saying, why is Harry Kane in the thumbnail? Benny McCarthy basically saying today that they wanted Harry Kane and Man United chose differently. I think this is a separate irritant for me, and I just wanted to get it off my chest. I'm tired of hearing about Harry Kane. It's the sort of thing Paul Scholes says we should have got Kane. It's the sort of thing Sky Sports say, TNT say, an ex-player says, because they really don't have a lot of depth to their knowledge. Harry Kane, whether he wanted to come, whether Ten Hag wanted him, or whether Man United wanted him, we were never getting Harry Kane. And it annoys the shit out of me that we still talk about Harry Kane because he was under contract and Spurs would have rather let it run down for a year than give him to Man United. So whatever people think about Harry Kane, and of course, Harry Kane's world class. I think we can look back at a lot of mistakes in the past, Terry, but I don't think we can look back at Harry Kane and say we should have got him, because we both know Spurs wouldn't do that deal unless we were going to give him 200 million up front, because that's how Daniel Levy works, to Spurs fans' irritation.
No, I agree. I agree completely. I don't think Kane I don't think he wanted to go to another English club. Listening to him speak, he obviously still very loyal to Tottenham as an example. He's gone out to Bayern and done a good job out there. And look, the mistake, I really like Rasmus. And I'm gutted that it hasn't gone the way I
Don't say that on this channel, mate. You ruined it. You ruined it.
I like him, but it hasn't worked as of right now. And that for me is more the focus. It isn't we should have got Kane. It's we've bought someone that hasn't worked out with yet. What's the remedy for it? Sort of looking back and sort of pining over and thorning over a player that we were never going to land just because he's a brilliant player. I just don't think it serves any purpose to Man United. I don't think it helps us as a football club. It creates more toxicity. What we need to look at is genuine, real solutions for the club to make us better, as opposed to, we should have signed Messi 5 years ago. Oh, we should have brought Ronaldo back 10 years ago. I mean, how far back do we take these conversations? But again, as you say, it's the mainstream media, and they don't have much depth to their analysis anymore.
Keel says, most of our problems are wages are recent. We've got to sell to buy. Cal says, what's the most damaging to our club? The players Ruben had in November delivered top 4, or that the players have shown their true sides and underperformed? Osman doesn't shoot outside the box. He's a service striker, says 5T4. and we need an experienced number 9 for Rasmus to learn from as a priority. But INEOS apparently don't want a 27-year-old who worked with Amorim. INEOS out, says Matty. Yeah, I think he's referring to that Gyökeres story from Laurie Whitwell last week, that we don't want to spend £60 million on Gyökeres because he'll be 27 in the summer, which sounds ridiculous if you want an experienced striker. Let's talk about INEOS, because that was one of the big reasons I invited Terry on tonight, because you've got some interesting takes on INEOS that probably are different to mine. So I think that makes for quite an interesting conversation. I very much didn't want INEOS. I called them an enemy of the football club when they proposed saving the Glazers. But I lost. I didn't get the full sale. And when they took over that Christmas Eve, or it was announced, I said, look, we've lost. And in life, I think you have to be humble and admit you've lost and hope for the best. And I think for about 8, I actually liked last summer transfer window. Some people call it crap. Yeah. I think I've heard Neville say it's crap. But I said, actually, I actually think it was a good transfer window. McTominay, Greenwood, Wan-Bissaka were got rid of. And I like the players we brought in. I've got to admit, 6 months later, though, the pile of stuff that they've done, for me, they're just a front for the Glazers. And I'm very dubious about the regeneration of the area. And I think I pretty much understand why the Glazers wanted to stay when they got this British millionaire who was a local lad that can front up and cover up a lot of the stuff they'd love to do, which is sacking people.
Yeah, look, I've listened to a lot of your stuff on INEOS and people across socials, and I understand the point of view. What I will say about my view is that I'm not blinded, I'm not polarized. I understand that people see it differently. I suppose my first view is that I'm just not fully judging them yet. I'm criticizing their mistakes, the Dan Ashworth appointment, keeping Ten Hag. This season is essentially a write-off because we made those 2 appointments. We stuck with Ten Hag, and then we've decided to change every element of our footballing philosophy in November and not really have the finances available to buy 2 or 3 players for Amorim in the January. I've criticized that heavily, as everybody else does.
Sorry, Terry, were you just because I think, were you Ten Hag out after the FA Cup, or were you going to give him a chance?
No, I wanted him out before that for a few reasons. The first one was, ever since he said that he was not trying to implement his brand of football, it was never a dig at him. I still think he's a very good coach in Ten Hag. I just didn't see what he was trying to do. My example would be, if I need some plumbing done at my house, I don't hire a carpenter. And I felt that he was trying to manage a team in a way in which he's not accustomed to. So that was first point.
That's really interesting, though, isn't it? Because I know we'll fly around all over the place
that's
here,
right.
But that's really interesting that you sort of gave up on Ten Hag because he started doing what he wasn't meant to be doing. And yet you look at what's going on in the media with ex-players and some of our fans at the moment who want Amorim to do exactly that, which would be my frustration. Why get a guy in to do a job and then get him to do something else?
Exactly, which is why when it comes to Amorim, again, I'm sure we'll get onto that in more detail. I understand everybody's complaints. I understand that some people don't like what he's doing. They don't like the 5 at the 3 at the back, the 5 at the back when we're defending. However, what I can compartmentalize things. I wanted us to hire a manager with a set style of football. I didn't care who the manager was or what the style was, because my personal needs don't need to be met. The club just had to stick to something. You bring in the manager, you build the philosophy, you build the squad, you build the culture. It takes 3 to 4 years. You go from there. So that was why I also looked at Ten Hag and thought, I think he needs to go, because also we got new owners who were then going to run the football operation. And typically speaking, when you look back, if I look back over the 38, 39 years of watching football, new owners typically very quickly change the ownership, change the management of the club. And I just felt that the best time to do it would be at the end of the season, and you give the new manager a pre-season period. So I was frustrated when Ten Hag stayed. However, I was objective and said, well, I'll objectively get behind it. I'm not going to be toxic. I'm not going to be negative at every single problem that we face. But it never really got going. And in the end, it just became untenable when he had to leave. So I've called INEOS out for that. I'm not a fan of what they're doing in terms of the redundancies, pulling money from the charities. I know you tweeted about this and we joined in and said, if there's anything we can do on the terrace, whether it's some charity streams, some donations towards the charity for ex-players, we're happy to help. I'm not a fan of any of that at all. I hate that we're doing it. It's a horrible look for the football club. At the same time, I'm someone that, and maybe this is my own naivety, but it's how I view things through most lenses around, in my personal life. If you tell me this is why you're doing something, I will give you the benefit of the doubt for a period to deliver. So we've seen the first quarter of the financial year come out. We've made a profit for the first time, where last year I think we lost 25 to 30 million pounds. So I'm not focusing on whether we're making a profit or loss because I care about the financial reports because I'm a geek. It's okay. Well, if we start making profits now every quarter, we need to, one, see that investment go into the squad. And if the squad and the team improves and we start generating more income, then I want to see what you do about re-employing these people or recreating jobs again. So for me, this isn't a case of just, I'm going to have a knee-jerk reaction and write everything off straight away. I will criticize the mistakes they make. I will be very vocal about the things they do that I don't like. But essentially, I'm going to give it time. I'm going to give it a few seasons to see where we are before I completely write it off and say there's no way this is working. So I wouldn't say I see it overly different from yourself. I'm just, maybe I'm a little bit more open to seeing what happens. And this summer's a great example. This summer, after not buying anything in January, has to be massive. It has to be absolutely huge. And Amorim himself this week said the team and the club need to start improving on the field. People are losing their jobs over the financial problems that we find ourselves in. And that, for me, is the big focus now. Can they improve on the field of play? And Amorim's doing his best as a coach, I believe. But what he needs is real solid investment this summer. And if we get to the end of the window, we've only spent 100 million on 2 or 3 bang average players, then I will be more down the lines of yourself around, I just don't see these guys working. They've been here a year, 18 months, and the progression is almost at zero. So for me, they've made mistakes. They've told us they're rectifying them. I'm going to give them any benefit of doubt, but they have to start making solid improvements and solid growth very, very soon for me.
It's interesting because I've got a video going out tomorrow morning, actually. How much can Man United spend in the summer? And, well, watch the video because I don't even know if I get to an answer at the end, despite giving masses of detail. And that's something I would concede, is that this summer is going to be very, very interesting. On one hand, I think they could pull 200 million out. On the other hand, I think they might pull out 5p. It's like, it's so difficult to figure it out. But you've got to watch that video. But so look, is it Terry or is it Gary? Because he's saying, let's give him a couple of years. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to ask you about Neville in a minute. But I think for me, and look,
let me just say the difference between me and Gary is I will still call out the bad things they do. So what I won't do is be silent for 2 years and say nothing. It's just basically I'm not coming to a conclusion now, but I will criticize the mistakes they make. Absolutely.
It's all, well, to be honest, I've not really heard many people sort of give INEOS time, but I think there are people. I see it in our chat, I see it in our comments who would, and your patience is to your credit. I completely could not give them any. I'd get rid of them tomorrow because I think that, to me, from everything I've seen so far, I'm just absolutely convinced that this was a marriage of convenience between the Glazers, who I cannot stand, and a guy who fronted up as being a local guy who loves the club, who is older than me and doesn't seem to know the club at all because he's done absolutely nothing a Man United fan would do and treated us like a business. And if you're a Man United fan and your whole plan was to go into Manchester United and treat it like a business and strip it back to save money and make it self-sufficient, when it's already self-sufficient, it's actually sinking because of debt. I just don't believe he's a proper Man United fan. I don't believe he's about Manchester United. And I don't believe any Man United fan would rescue the Glazers. And that, for me, is something that really I'm struggling to move past. Look, if they turn this around, I will applaud it. But I don't like what they're doing anyway. I just don't like it anymore. And when you hear about more job cuts, and I actually heard Gary Neville sort of talking about this last week, and it was like, and everyone keeps going, Man United have got double the amount of staff Arsenal have got, this, that, and the other. And I was on a minute. Hold on a minute. On the one hand, we're the club that everyone talks about the most. We're the club that has the biggest social media followings. We're the football club that's got its own fucking TV channel. I'd expect us to have. You can't just sack people and say we want to have. Arsenal have got. We need to have the same employees as Arsenal and Man City. We are an absolute mammoth football club. We might not be achieving on the pitch, but
yeah,
look, we're in debt. But I'm not here to convince or anything like that. I'm just saying, for me,
I agree on that.
I just can't stand them.
No, I understand that, and again, I'm not emotional about it, and I get where you're coming from. I view it this way as well. You know, when there was an announcement a few weeks ago where they were going to cut the salary of some ex-legends who do like ambassadorial work. I think it was Brian Robson and everything else. So again, when I saw that, my first question was, well, first of all, what's the net worth of those individuals? An example I would give, if they're broke and we're cutting their money completely, I'm against it. But if they're all worth 4, 5, it's like when Sir Alex lost his salary. I weren't worried about a man who's worth 60 million quid. It doesn't personally bother me too much. The second question I had was, and this is where the media have got to do a better job because they have access that we don't. Well, what was their salaries and what is it being reduced to? Because again, if they're earning 250 grand a year and it's being reduced to 200 grand a year and they're rich, I don't have any sympathy for them. But if they're broke and they were earning 30 grand a year and they're being told it's dropping to 12 or whatever it may be, then I have more of a problem with it. And I think with a lot of these stories, we're given limited information, like the debt. So again, I wanted a full buyout, absolutely. I also want the debt to be paid off. And I've been chasing the likes of Kieran Maguire and a few other financial experts for a while. I've even emailed the Premier League and they haven't come back to me, but who am I to them? No one. I'm under the impression through some conversations I've had that INEOS can't just pay the debts off to help us from a PSR point of view. So if they just say they pumped in now £600 million and paid the cash off, PSR rules dictate that is then all offset against spending. So any additional profits we make through not having debt, if the money's pumped in by the owners, that is all offset. Any money essentially that the owners pump in, it can be used for anything in the club other than transfers. So the only way we can actually raise funds and pay the debt down to lower the interest rates to give us more money in the long term is by the club generating the income or saving the income, i.e. the redundancies, and pumping that in. The other option is if he was to do it, the Glazers would have to give up a bigger percentage, and the Glazers are not willing to do that because they want to pocket that money themselves and not pay a bank. Now, I've heard Simon Jordan talk about this. I've heard a few financial experts touch on it. My request as a Man United fan is give us the Premier League must know because the PSR rules belong to them. Tell us what is and isn't right. Because I think the one thing I would say, if INEOS can just pay it off tomorrow, no problems, then I'm more in your camp. But if they're restricted on what they can and can't pay off, and we're not being told that, that's frustrating to me as a fan because it's leading to us disliking our owners more or whatever it may be without knowing the full facts. So I'm not saying what I've been told is right. I've been chasing, though, for 4 weeks the answers on this, and nobody wants to seem to give it to me. And I find that strange.
We're both from a financial background before this. And I have got a video tomorrow. I've done the video about the land that nobody was talking about that's right in the middle of the regeneration area. The money that INEOS and the Glazers are going to make from that and a new stadium is incredible. If you've got a 100,000 capacity stadium, the millions are flying in. So there is a long-term plan as to why INEOS and the Glazers are working together. In the short term, my understanding is that if Qatar had bought the club, they'd have cleared the debt tomorrow. They'd have started building the stadium the next day. And it'd be half built by now, and we wouldn't be in debt. And therefore, we wouldn't have to pay debt interest, which is about £30 million a year. So my understanding is that I don't know how INEOS would do it when they only own 28%. I don't know whether there's rules against that. But if they bought the whole club, they could have cleared the debt on day one, and you'd never be paying debt interest, and you wouldn't be in £700 million of debt. So the club would have way more liquidity. This deal just doesn't work. Fundamentally, it doesn't work. And I think Sir Jim thought it was better than nothing. But we are where we are with it. And I think that the good thing is that people are having conversations about it, because we also owe about £400 million in transfers we've already made, just because of, year one, you pay this, year two, you pay that. How do you pay that off? We've got one of the biggest revenues in the Premier League, and clubs with a quarter of our revenue are kicking the shit out of us in the Premier League. It's not like the embarrassing thing for Man United, I think, is that we failed with absolutely all the circumstances to dominate. Garfield says, call Neville out. Before we move on, because there's a few things we want to talk about. I want to talk about Amorim next. Do you think Neville is wrong to not call them out? And do you have any opinion on why he's not calling them out?
I think he's wrong.
Sky Sports on telly at the weekend.
Well,
Everything's Amorim's fault, but nothing's the Glazers' fault, or even INEOS.
Well, for me, just firstly on the mainstream media, whenever I've seen them talk about the Glazers, the debt, and how badly we've been run, and I see United fans quote tweet and say, "Thank God, finally they're talking about it," my attitude's always been, no, you can't come to the party now. We've been screaming about this for two decades. Don't you dare only talk about it because it's, and they've only done it with the Glazers on a handful of occasions when it's been popular. The vast majority of TV pundits, Gary Lineker and co, have told us for years the Glazers invested loads of money, which is a lie. It was all the club's money. They never invested a penny. They've never really cared about our owners. They all seem to, ex-pros, pundits, journalists, the Premier League, they all seem to come together in these moments for one reason or another. Gary Neville not calling out the owners, even when it comes to the redundancy side of things. This is a man, listen, I've got so much respect for Gary Neville as a player. I loved him. Didn't quite have the pajamas and the posters on the wall like you did, but I
can't believe people think that's true.
I can't believe people fell for that, mate. Honest to God, it was, some people have got to touch some grass, but for me, I love what he's done. He's always spoke up a lot about protecting the working class and being for the working class. And the fact that he said nothing, and for me, if he's got inside information as to why this is needed, why it's important, there's a real plan, they're good people, I'm working with them, tell us that. The fact he's so quiet, that does make me really nervous. Is it because part of this regeneration plan, does he own some of the, he owns a lot of stuff. Does he own some of the land in that area? You know,
he owns hotel football, doesn't he?
He owns a hotel. Does he own more? Is it more about, well, I don't want to upset them because I want to be involved and I want to make more money? And I understand why people think that. I am confused.
You might have signed an NDA, mate. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there could be that. I mean, in fairness, yes, there could be an NDA, so he can say absolutely nothing about INEOS in any capacity, which again makes a lot of sense.
In which case, he shouldn't be on fucking Sky. Like, if there is any conflict of interest,
I agree. I think his job is to criticize, and I almost feel at the moment he's overcompensating by not talking about the ownership by going in very hard on Amorim. And I know Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was his mate, but there was barely any criticism for him. And for me, I've been calling out these people think I defend Arsenal a lot when I call out their punditry. There's nothing really to do with Arsenal, even though they're the subject matter of that particular clip. It's we pay a lot of money for Sky TV in England, and I want my pundits to be unbiased and fair and down the middle, and essentially do what they did when we were kids, Mark. You know, they used to educate us. The pundits on TV would teach us. They wouldn't be right about everything on predictions, but they would teach us about the game. We'd learn and understand it. Now I just feel that they watch what we do on as fans, and we're fan channels. We're not the mainstream media, but they kind of copy what we do it worse, but they just seem to, they have the money to amplify it as an example. And if you can't give opinions on the real serious matters relating to our club, you shouldn't be covering it.
It's true. I mean, look, you know, you're right. I mean, when you think about it, even before this, they didn't actually speak about the Glazers that often. And Rio, who I just think is a social media influencer now, legend of a player, but I think he's an average social media influencer. Even him yesterday, he was talking about INEOS, and he was going, we've got to stop the Glazers taking the money out. Well, they've not had dividends out for about 2 years before they sold the club anyway. And it's sort of like, this is the thing. If people are going to say stuff, they need to understand what they're talking about. But, you know, actually, a couple of things there. I mean, I saw Martin Keown today having a pop at De Ligt again. And I'm like, he's like, De Ligt's basically saying De Ligt's shit. And I'm like, this is the standard of punditry, because most Man United fans would say De Ligt's been one of our better players, but this is the standard of punditry. It's interesting. Look, I want to sort of move to the summer. In January, we had this whole Garnacho for pure profit. And we've spoken about the difficulty that Man United have in selling compared to, let's say, a Manchester City or even a Liverpool. That Coutinho deal basically built Klopp a whole team. So I think some people were sort of like, well, look, if Garnacho's the only way to do it, let's sell Garnacho, but let's keep Casemiro, who does fuck all for 18 million a year, and Mount, who's done nothing, this, that, and the other. Would you, in relation to the summer, if you've got to get players in, would you be willing to let Amenu or Garnacho go and still sit with those? Does that sit comfortably for you? Is that just, you know, kicking the ball down the road? It's a bit like Barcelona pulling levers, isn't it? Let's get some money in to buy this and accumulate, you know, or do you actually go, no, we would rather not spend and take time to remove the problems and retain the future?
My gut reaction is especially with Mainu, is don't sell him. I think he's a sensational player. If we put the finances aside for a moment, what does go through my mind is this, though. And this is where I have to be balanced, because I've said I want us to pick a manager and his philosophy. And I don't just want to build it for him. I want a philosophy that will last beyond that manager, so that we saw what's happened with Slot and Klopp. It's just been a very simple transition. The same will happen at Man City when Pep leaves. There'll be a simple transition. It won't be a completely opposing ideology to the game. So I want to do that. The problem when you pick that philosophy is some of the players that we may love individually playing in a 4-2-3-1, they might become surplus to requirements now. And I think I've got a gut feeling that Garnacho will fit in that space. Now, I'm a fan of Garnacho. I think there's a player in there, but I understand they might want to cash in on him. My biggest view is always this: is who we're bringing in to replace them better? And as long as that happens, I'm relatively relaxed. The one thing I wouldn't like us to get rid of, and if we broke this record, it would hurt, is the academy player in every single matchday squad. So if we suddenly
no chance of that at the weekend.
yeah, very true, very true.
Britain broke it the other way. The entire squad was an academy,
Nearly. So for me, I don't want to break records like that I want to remain for the rest of my life and beyond. At the same time, I'm club first, and this is probably why we're more skeptical of the Maino and the Garnacho conversations, is because they made the mistake with Ashworth and Ten Hag. They bring in Amorim. We have a poor January window. We look like we're in a worse space at the end of it because we've let players go. Yeah. So there's an element of I don't trust them to get rid of those players because they're not going to bring in better. And I absolutely understand that feeling because I'm nervous about it as well. I also do think there's a financial element. We are starting to turn a profit. That will probably drop in the next quarter because we obviously sacked Ten Hag and hired Amorim and paid compensation. So you'll probably find that there's a loss in that period now because of that mistake. And we've got to stop doing that. At the same time, I think selling some players for pure profit is going to be what's needed. But pure profit isn't just from academy players. You can get pure profit from players whose deals have been paid off. So for instance, Deleu's a great example. If we've renewed on Maguire, if we sold Maguire now for 20 million, people got to remember net spend isn't what's used. That will show on the year's trading accounts as pure profit of 20 million because there's no outstanding payments for Maguire. So there's a few players we have to look at, and we have to listen. The first thing you get rid of is anyone who doesn't want to play the style, doesn't like Amorim, isn't pulling their weight, isn't running in training, hasn't got the right attitude. They should be first out the door because that will always damage the squad and its harmony first. But I'm not against selling anyone, barring a couple of players I feel like should be untouchable.
Yeah, and I think it is nuanced. I mean, there's two things as well. First of all, when you look at we have to remove the deadwood. We've been talking about this since Van Gaal days, and the quintessential deadwood player is Casemiro. If you're going to sell Garnacho or Mainu or Rashford, you can't do that and then come back for the US tour with Casemiro there going, I just like it here. I bet a 350,000 reason why you like it here. You've got it. That just symbolizes, whether you like INEOS or not, that symbolizes just bad business to be selling potential for, but keeping players like that. And this is one of my big issues. And also, secondly, I'll come back to that. Secondly, the trouble is people go, sell Garnacho for 60 million. It's pure profit. We can get 4 players worth 60 million, put them on a 5-year deal. It's 15 million each year, blah, blah, blah. And we all know the maths. The problem is, that's if that 60 million all goes towards the transfers. What if that 60 million goes towards the shortfall because we're not in Europe, or towards the 400 million we owe on other transfers, and suddenly there's nothing left? You're selling Garnacho to survive, and that's something very different.
And that's a great point, because for me, as I've said, I'm not fully judgmental of everything surrounding INEOS yet. However, I don't really mind them making money off the land, sale of land, etc. I don't really mind that to a certain degree. As long as the money we're making is going into the team and the team is improving, then I'm all for making money. Because you need money to be successful in football. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. We've seen City fallen off this year. They go out and spend 200 million euros in January. Money is a key component in the game. However, you're right. If they start taking 20% here, 30% there, putting it in their back pockets or tucking it away, that's when we as fans need to come out and call it out 100%.
Savage says, I can't believe Shaw, Mount, Casemiro would stay and we'd sell a Garnacho or Mainu. There's something wrong there. But what I would say before we move on is, though, so I'm almost in two camps here. I mean, I don't want to sell Garnacho. I don't want to sell Mainu. But if we ever had these conversations, which wouldn't, if Ruben Amorim just rang up and went, listen to the show, Garnacho's just not part of my plans. There's someone else I feel is going to do a lot better, and I like Garnacho, but I can get £60 million for him, and there's someone else I want. I'd go, right, that's absolutely fine. Get me Sir Jim Radcliffe on. And they go, right, you, I understand him, but you'd have sold him anyway because you're scum. You're out. You'd sell a young player. And I don't care what he says. I agree with him, but you were going to do it anyway because you were just doing it for money. And I still don't like you, but I understand what you're doing. So I would never go against a manager that wanted to do it. But having said that, in January, Amorim doubled down numerous times that he didn't want to sell Garnacho. So it does go back to that. They were looking to do it for money. But just on that, before we start talking about Amorim, actually, I mean, from a financial point of view, I just do not understand the whole young player for profit. We've seen Villa, Chelsea do it, Man United, Man City have done it for years and years. It's got to be one of the weirdest things, whether it's footballing or business, I've ever really thought of, because basically the advantage is selling young players in football. If we sell Garnacho to Chelsea for 60 million, Chelsea don't actually get anything from that, apart from hopefully Garnacho is going to be good, because again, they then get stuck in the cycle of he's on a 5-year contract. They can't really sell him because, so they've got to go and find another young player to sell. So you're in this endless cycle. They've got to change something so it's advantageous to still sell players that you've bought, because it's now just like, I think United are getting a lot of young players, and a lot of people are going after young players because it's almost like a farm of, this is how you've got to sell young players to bring other players in.
I think it is. I think it is and it isn't. I think we're more aware of it now because PSR is in place and FFP, but it's been around since 2013, 14. It's only been the last couple of years with the hangover of lockdown, etc. It's only been after that period that clubs have been punished. And it's since we've seen the teeth of those rules that everybody's focused on it. But Chelsea used to buy loads of young players and put them through their academy. Chelsea were making £30 million a year in loan fees, by and large, in almost the entire reign of Roman Abramovich. And then FIFA changed the rules about how many young players you could loan out. So clubs have always done these types of deals where you're selling players. But for years, all we ever spoke about in the media was net spend. And I think because of the likes of Kieran Maguire and people coming on and showing us that we understand net spend's real in terms of how a newspaper shows it, but that's not how clubs do their finances. And I think social media world has done this. I think we are all far more, and I don't just mean you and I as content creators, I mean the viewers and everyone that's sort of on socials. I think we're far more aware now of what happens at clubs, how the finances work, than we were 10, 20 years ago, because there was no information on it. So I think that it's happened for a long time. I just think we're more acutely aware of it now than we have been.
It's a great point. I mean, the chat will know this. I remember even 2 years ago, every year the season ends, you start talking about how much you need to spend. And even 2 years ago, we were talking about budgets, and Mark Ogden would go, the budget's only 100 million. And we go, 100 million? You won't get 2 players for that. But actually, we just weren't educated that with 100 million, you could buy 5 £60 million players and just spread it out across 5 years.
And amortize it. And again, I used to get a lot of stick for this. Obviously, my job working in the bank, I did a secondment in the department of the bank that lends money to the football clubs. And that's where I learned about this. And at that time, because transfers, we were in that market where when I was there, 30, 40 million was like, wow, that's a colossal, that's like the 150 millions now. So clubs would do £40 million totality in a summer, but they'd completely borrow it. Because as we all both know, as people that own businesses, cash is king. You don't sell, it's cheaper sometimes to borrow money than it is to take it out of your savings account, especially if you've got a £200 million or £100 million cash reserve. So, and I remember talking about it, and I was like, no, that's not how it works. And it was hard because I didn't have the expertise to explain it, verbalize it, because I'm not an accountant. And then people like Kieran Maguire came along, and everyone understands how it works now.
Monoxide Poison, thanks for your super chat, says, I'd rather get a proper leader who can pick up the team when the chips are down instead of this give up and pack up tools. IDK says, Cunha should be a main target, and Mbumo. Combined, they have 26 goals. United combined have 28. Doesn't always work out like that, but I know what you mean. I'd take Cunha in a heartbeat. Double D always comes out with a good comment, says, we have a manager with a set style of system. We have a squad who have no idea how to play it. Until that is rectified, we're going nowhere. And John Hammer says, I'm pleased that Man United fans are working together. Please, can we work more on this going forward? We can argue about things, but things like this, we must work together, which is exactly why I got Terry on, because I wanted to talk about INEOS. And I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. Jim says, I absolutely love this duo. Great discussion. Thank you very much. And Darren Taylor says, do you think Atletico Madrid had any sell-ons for Garnacho? I very much doubt it, mate. I very much doubt it. Let's talk about Ruben Amorim. You know what? I was just like, today, it's interesting what you said, Terry, about how you sort of went against Ten Hag because he stopped doing what he was brought in to do. And yet you've got Gary Neville and co, and even fans in our fan base. I mean, we're both on social media. If I see another clip, I've seen Stephen Warnock, Alan Smith, and Michael Dawson on Sky in the last 24 hours, clips on social media saying he needs to change it. And I don't think anybody actually says what he's going to change it to and what change you should make. It's almost like, you know, when people just agree with an opinion because they think it's the hipster thing to do. I still don't know what people want him to change to, but I sort of like went through this yesterday. I think, you know, he's been brought in for a certain reason. I think Double D hits the nail on the head. He hasn't got the players to do what he's got to do. So we need to change the players, not the manager's play style. But interestingly, I put this out today just to sort of wind people up a little bit. But Ten Hag's second season, we won the Carabao Cup and we were quite good. His third season, we were total shit, but we still won the FA Cup. And Amorim hasn't had a great start. Statistically, Man United shots conceded per game. The season we won the Carabao Cup and we had a good season with Ten Hag, 10.7 shots per game. Last season, where we were a mess, but we still won the FA Cup, 14.2 shots per game. Under Amorim, we're under 10, 9.6. So, but let's go back to the 4-3-3. You know, so obviously we need to score more. We need to score more, but everybody knows you've got to, you've got to concede less. And I think we are factually conceding less shots per game under Amorim than we did under Ten Hag in his last 2 years, one of which was very good. But people want us to go back and play that system when we're always going to struggle to create chances. That's never going to change. 7 years, that's been the problem. And I think Terry's right with the profile of players. They want to shoot. But we can't go back to conceding loads of chances. And that's something that's actually moving in the right direction. And also, our average possession under Amorim is nearly 54%. It was 50% under Ten Hag. So people go, it's only 3.5%, but that's nearly a 10% increase. And possession, even if it gone up by 2%, I'd be very happy in the Prem. So we are moving slowly, yes, but we are moving in the right direction. To abandon that, I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole Amorim pile-on? I think it's a pile-on.
When people say that he's got to change his system, I think people confuse formation and systems. I've watched him play a different system away at Liverpool to what we played at home against Leicester in the FA Cup, as an example. So the formation is similar, but the system and the way we operated on the day was different. Away at Tottenham, we tried doing something in the first half where Bruno would split away from Casemiro, and it almost became like a sort of four or five at the back, one in midfield, and then four in the attack. It didn't work particularly well. There's always an easy out ball for Spurs. We changed it in the second half again. I remember one of the first European game, I want to say it was Bodo Glimt, where it wasn't working, where Delo was playing the left fullback role. I cannot remember who was playing in the 10 role, but it wasn't working. And at halftime, he brings Garnacho on. But what he did is typically in his system, the fullbacks provide the width. In this game, Delo was inversing and Garnacho provided the width. So there's a number of examples of him changing his system, changing the approach and the positions of players in games. It's just the starting formation is different. And you're always in a flat back five. It's a problem. It's a problem. That's because the profiles are not right. Once you get the correct profiles in those positions over a 2 or 3 transfer window period, you will see far less of us sitting there with a back five, unless we are camping in because we've got a 2 or 3 goal lead, or it's late in a half, and we just want to see it out, you'll see it more be 3 at the back as an example. I've also heard the manager talk about how there will come a time where he may go 4 at the back. He doesn't see there being a huge differential between the two things. And I think we spend far too much time talking about it. Pep didn't change his system this season. He just went and bought better players. As an example, every now and then he might change a position and go, do you know what? I'm going to, instead of using 2 fullbacks and 2 centre-backs, I'm going to go 4 centre-backs because all my centre-backs can play out from the back. So they're comfortable moving into the middle. That isn't him changing his style. That's just using a different profile of player in a position. And I just feel that there's a lot of over-analysing of Ruben Amorim. He hasn't had a summer transfer window. He hasn't had a pre-season. They're ignoring the context. The biggest club in England with the biggest amount of media pressure, 12 years of failure, financial difficulties, a Frankenstein squad in a toxic dressing room that's going to take years to fix. And I was talking to a United fan who wants him out today. And I said, well, what's your alternative as opposed to just repeating what we've done before? And he's like, well, let's just get a proven winner at the highest level and give him 3 or 4 years. So I said, hang on, let me just get this right. You want to do the same as me, but with a different person? Yes. So it's like, so we actually agree on the process of getting out of the hole. You're just not happy with the individual that's doing it. Absolutely. And I think a lot of this is down to a desire for instant gratification and narcissism. And the funniest part, he said, I went, why don't you have any faith in Man United, in Amorim? He said, Terry, do you know what? I've got to be honest, it ain't Amorim. Man United have burnt me with the last 2 or 3 managerial appointments. So now I'm just lashing out. And it reminded me of a few of my mates that have had bad breakups that suddenly never want to get into a new relationship. Don't like women anymore because they got heartbroken by one. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, you can't treat the club that way, though. You know, you can't treat Amorim badly because of what a previous manager did. And that's what I'm trying not to do in this circumstance. So I think there's a lot of overanalyzing of Amorim. I know why they're coming for him because it gets clicks, it gets attention. Where Man United, factually, we're everybody's biggest rival. Everybody wants us to fail. But my message to United fans is this. Rivals want Amorim sacked. When it was Ten Hag, when it was Ollie, they wanted him to stay. Take whatever the rivals are asking for, go with the opposite. Go with the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It always reminds me when they wanted Fellaini to be picked against us. But no, I think that I think you're spot on because I think we've spoken about this quite a lot in the community, but I genuinely think that, you know, those books you can get on Amazon, like I sometimes buy them when I don't know what I'm doing about something like cooking a cake for dummies or, you know, changing a light bulb for dummies. And I think Punditry for Dummies is talk about changing tactics and formation because it almost convinces everybody and makes you sound like you know what you're on about. And you get these hipsters on TikTok talking about what Amorim needs to tweak to make Man United great. But we already know that Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, we were absolutely fine. And yeah, you can put it down to players get up from those games and they concentrate more. Yeah, I think there's less errors, but also we were set up differently because they're teams that we've got to respect. Whereas you get Leicester at home, they're going to sit back. We've always struggled traditionally under every manager with a low block. So it's an inherited problem. Also, I think the concentration levels drop and you get more misplaced passes. And we've seen, like you say, we've seen tactical differences. I've done watch-alongs and people have said, we're actually playing a back 4 at the moment. And I'm going, yeah, I think you are. I think Martinez has moved across there. Delo's moved in here. I think you're right. So those things are already happening, but you get this very basic analysis of a football game that, oh, he needs to change his tactics, his formation. And you always put your hand up and go, well, what would you do then? Oh, I go back to what Ten Hag did before. And then you go back and you show him the stats and go, that didn't actually work. We actually sacked him in November, just as a, you know, put my hand up again. And I think also that one of the worst things about any situation, and, you know, I've been down the pub with a mate before and he said, we're getting divorced. And I'll be like, we were around your house at Christmas. You're having a right laugh. And he was like, yeah, we've not gone for years. You don't, you know, and because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors and you don't know what's going on. People start talking about tactics. You can only deal with what's in front of you. And there are so many basic errors in a Man United team. We can't defend corners. We can't score corners. We can't score set pieces. We can't create chances. We don't pick up the runners. We're no good on cutbacks. Our goalkeeper makes mistakes. We misplace passes. We play the wrong pass. We shoot from distance. These are all basics that tactics don't teach you. You should already know. But also you get people saying, oh, do this, do that, do this, do that. If we do this, if we press better like this. Yet none of us have got access to Carrington. None of us know what the instructions are. Maybe Amorim's doing exactly what you say and exactly what I think or exactly what he thinks, and they're just not doing it. And to be fair, that is probably unfair to say, but I'd punt that it probably is that because, hello, Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ralph Rangnick could only play his style of football for half an hour, yet at Austria, he's been doing it every bloody game. I think fundamentally, people don't realise that some of these managers are actually telling these players to do it.
This is the thing. If you go back to LVG, we had a lot of the ball, but the amount of games we weren't winning because we couldn't create the chance or score the goals, drawing loads, and just we'd dominate games and then we'd lose it. And then the club went, oh, well, we've done that for 2 years. We're not going to back that anymore. We're going to go and get Jose. I think year one, first 18 months, they let Jose manage that team how he wanted. 2 trophies in his first season, got into the champion. Second year, started well, faded, but still came second, but gave him a new deal. You came to that March and he walks into the room, and I know this might upset Player FC, but I don't care. I love the 2 players, by the way, but I don't care about the individual or the manager. It's the roles. We've got to get rid of Martial and Pogba for X, Y, and Z reason for us to go to the next level. Instead of backing the manager, they said no. That is where the player power issue sort of started for me. Jose loses control. Ever since that moment, we can argue from LVG really, because we decided to stop. We didn't give him what he needed to make it work. He didn't have enough technical players, didn't have an out-and-out experienced goal scorer. And then from the Jose moment onwards, every manager has been made to adapt to the players that we have, as opposed to being able to implement their style, their way of operating, their players. And you can't always land even Fergie didn't get all of his targets. There's loads of famous examples of players from Batistuta to Shearer to Gaza that he wanted that he never landed, but he was still able to do it in his image. And for me, that's where we've gone fundamentally wrong. And I look at this now and think, well, why haven't we had the same great start and win percentage that the others got? 50s, 60s, some of them even 70% win ratios like Ollie. Well, it's because it's the first manager that says, I'm not adapting to you, which is, people can call it hopium or copium, and that's a colloquial term for it. But that's why I have a bit more faith in this, because it feels different to before. And this is what I was asking for. So it's probably why I'm more patient with everything than other United fans, is because most of what we're doing, barring the redundancies and the charity stuff we mentioned earlier in the stream, it's what I've been asking for. And I've not been asking for it because I know more than the average bear. I don't think I'm a better football fan. I've just looked into, studied, and listened to the rivals of clubs that are very successful in this last decade on how they built their structure, how they manage their club, and how they operate. So all I'm asking for is us to do what the other modern day teams do. And if we do that well enough over a 3 to 4 year period, there's a chance we could get somewhere back close to the top. What I don't want is for us to repeat the mistakes we've made in the last 12 years again. That, for me, seems ridiculous, to repeat the same mistakes again, as opposed to looking at the models that have worked and doing something similar. And just my final point on that is, it's not even about building the team in Amorim's image for him. It's building something for the club that Amorim might move on in 5 years, successful manager at United, might take over Portugal. Then what we do is find someone who like similar profiles to him, like we mentioned earlier, like Slot and Klopp have done. And if we do that, then you can create continuity over a long period of time. Because what we're not going to get is a 25-year manager again like Fergie. So you have to build your operation. And that was our biggest mistake in the last 12 years, is every manager came in, was called a manager, and given carte blanche over running the club. It's just ridiculous. Managers aren't even trained now in their younger years to run football clubs. They're all head coaches. Yet we're giving them all manager of the football club responsibilities. We've just got to get away from all those mistakes and move into this new world. So yeah, I'm 100% behind Amorim. Keep doing what you're doing. Whether it succeeds or whether it fails, let's try something different. Because after 12 years, I really feel like saying, what have we got to lose in reality? Not much.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Amorim thing. Obviously, I'm not going to agree with you on the INEOS thing, and I actually would say that I would say that actually INEOS have damaged Amorim by not letting him come in the summer, which is what he wanted to do, because they've thrown him into this situation where he's losing every week. And the problem is, every fan base has its idiots and intelligent people. And I can't call them idiots. I didn't call anyone an idiot. I'm just saying every walk of life has its idiots and intelligent people. It's called diversity. And when you bring a manager in that's losing every week, and some people don't have patience and don't have depth of knowledge, like you've just displayed there, they'll be going, get this manager out, get this manager out. And you're absolutely correct. Like, patience, not talking about patience with INEOS, not talking about patience with the Glazers or people getting the sack, but the manager, you got, it seems to come down every manager. It was 3 years, then it was 2.5 years, then it's 2 years, now it's 6 months. You've got to stop and go, has the manager ever really been responsible for the problems in 10 years? If we've learned one thing, we've learned that. And also the club, and I'm not going to give INEOS amazing credit for appointing Amorim, but he was a good appointment. Maybe it's because they knew he was going to Man City. Maybe Barada said, they're going to get him, so we better get him. In which case, Barada's worth appointing, isn't he? But we've ended up with Amorim. He's brought one player in Dorgu, and we instantly look better with that player. So imagine what can happen when you give him 4 or 5, considering Van Gaal had 4 or 5, Mourinho had 4 or 5, Ollie had 4 or 5. And absolutely, like you said, Liverpool are going to win the league minimum, maybe even the Champions League as well. They've brought a manager in that never bought anybody because he was seamlessly stepping into Klopp. What we've done over the last 10 years is go from David Moyes to Van Gaal. Yeah, no comparison. Van Gaal to Mourinho, again, no comparison. Mourinho to Ollie, I'm talking stylistically, no comparison. Ollie to Rangnick, God, no. Rangnick to Ten Hag, should have been some comparison, but Ten Hag literally ripped up his list of players and ideas. And then we've gone Ten Hag to Amorim, which, as we know, systematically and stylistically is very different. So I think that's a great idea, but that can only happen with patience. We've got to start having a vision where, even if it's a new United way, there is a United way that can be passed on to somebody else, because it's cost us hundreds of millions of pounds having to keep. It's like somebody trying to build a football stadium, and whether they get halfway through or 3/4 the way through, somebody says that's shit, and instead of getting someone in to finish it, they knock it all down again, and someone starts building it completely differently.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've done. We have never got to the end of a rebuild of even a squad, and we're now in a position, because of 20 years of neglect, where the stadium needs a rebuild, the training facilities need upgrading, the culture is damaged, the squad is an absolute mess. So it becomes a club-wide rebuild, which makes everything harder and longer, because the money's now got to be spread. If for instance, the Glazers had improved the stadium, training ground and everything else, and the ethos and the culture was great, we could focus all of our resources on the squad. But now those resources have got to be spread across every facet of the football club, because the whole thing has been allowed to rot, which is why I don't take the mainstream media seriously with their criticism, because everything is I'm hearing pundits talk about, they're 15th because of Amorim. No, we're 15th because of every mistake that's been made in the last 20 years, and every mistake made post-Fergie. I've even seen United fans online jumping on this, doing Woodward revisionism. Things were better under Woodward. We bought better players. At least we spent money. Well, the reason we don't have as much money now is because of all the money he wasted. Do you know what we're suffering with? A lot of our fan base is suffering with Stockholm syndrome. We want to go back to our capturers, because we feel, we now suddenly feel out of our comfort zone, being out and about and living free lives, as it were. But we've got Stockholm syndrome, 110%. People want to go back to the people that broke us and put us in this situation, rather than give Amorim some time to maybe try and fix us. It's a strange world.
Alex Roach says it gets government stadium, it won't be United home, and that Old Trafford is all about, says Alex. Nick Perry says, makes me laugh when we had Eric Ten Hag, all we heard was he's not playing his system. Amorim does his own system, and now he has to play something else. Make it make sense. Exactly. Josh says, awesome collab and nuanced Man United discussion. I'm a member of both channels. Would love to see Terry on That's Football podcast as well. And Taker says, excuse me, will Amorim last as long or longer than Ten Hag, even though the club forced him to come before the summer? I think he'll turn on him, unfortunately. And Ray Carl says, big up to my two United brothers, Mark and Terry. Worldwide clash show tonight to big United fans on here. And Alex Zed says, the problem with INEOS is they lack transparency. Stadium plans, Project 2028, finding the next Mbappe, but they don't paint clear plan for the immediate future. What's the pathway for all this? I think the communication has been total shit. We've gone past 9 o'clock, everybody. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has as well. And obviously you, Terry, you might have hated it.
No, mate. Listen, it's been many years. It's good to it's good that we've obviously had conversations privately over the last couple of years and patched things up. And yeah, it's great to be back on and talking United. My channel's such a neutral channel that talking Man United is hard sometimes because I would say about 60% of my audience now don't support Man United, so it's different. So yeah, it's really nice just to have a United conversation, mate. Loved it.
I tell you what, I mean, look, Terry's more than capable of holding a show on his own. I think it'd be a brilliant idea. I mean, I don't know what the chat think. I'd be brilliant just to get you back on an 8 o'clock show and let you lead it yourself, because I think one of the big problems of doing this, and I'm exactly the same, although you do more of these sort of things than me, I love my chat. So I like having guests, but I know it takes away from the interaction with the chat. But yeah, I think if the chat were up for it and you were up for it, that would be absolutely great.
Yeah, mate, of course I would be. It'd be an honor, mate, to do something. Host a show on the United Stand. If the viewers want it, then great. If they don't, it's up to you. It's your channel. But yeah, of course, mate, 100% up for that. 100%.
Cool. Well, we'll see about that. Sometimes on a Thursday night I'm doing five-a-side and stuff, and Kev's not about, so maybe we'll sort it out on Thursday. We'll have a chat about that. Lots of people saying yes. Somebody will say no.
So I can take the feedback.
Nobody has said no. If it was me, they'd definitely say no. You're a knobhead or something like that, even just to wind me up. Keel says, if this was the summer, I would 100% agree. But what can we actually do now? We cannot get new players now, can we? So what can we do? I think European football. That reminds me, actually, I'm going to drop a video at 7 o'clock tomorrow about how much we can spend. If you've enjoyed the chat we're having about INEOS, it's very difficult, but it sort of gives a little bit more meat to the bones, definitely. Phil Mitchell says, no, I don't want him on. Just kidding. Exactly. Terry, thank you very much for coming on. Obviously, Football Terrace, as he says, does lots of these types of shows with a lot more people. I don't know how he does it, but fair play. And you should definitely check that out. And we'll definitely have a chat afterwards about seeing if we can sort him out to come on a show, because I know Terry's more than capable of holding a show on his own and interacting with this fantastic community. So we'll have a chat about that. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it tonight. I don't get to do this very often. So thank you very much for coming on, Terry.
Not a problem at all. And yeah, hopefully see you all again soon.
Cheers, everyone. Make sure you smash a like. Leave us a comment if you're not watching live, and we'll speak to you on the next one. Right, I think we're gone.